main key points you were saying.
So the first chapter becomes extremely important to get an understanding of the overall subject. Now we already have the keywords. Okay. So in terms of when you go to the learning objectives, it wants you to understand the meaning, objective, and importance. So the objective becomes always important. Whenever you're reading any chapter, the objective of the chapter is always important because the questions would be tested which are based on the objective of the chapter. So if there is a particular objective, please understand what is the objective of the chapter. So most of the questions will be linked to the objective. Then there is a discussion on functions and role of cost accounting, installation of cost accounting. These are good to know. On differentiation between cost accounting, financial accounting, management accounting, it is very, very important because you have all the three. You have financial accounting, cost accounting, management accounting. You have to clearly know what is the application of each accounting system and what type of companies and what type of context. Next, methods of costing. If you look at it, methods of costing and techniques of costing, the entire second module is focused on methods and techniques of costing. Okay, this is the overall introduction. Now coming to the specific chapter view, so it talks about objectives of cost management, scope and relationship, use of IT and costing, a small topic, users of cost and management accounting, role and functions, cost objective, responsibilities, and most importantly, cost classification. Now, cost classification is fundamental for all the chapters. How do you classify costs? If you look at this, objectives of cost accounting, ascertainment of cost. So the chapter one which you're talking about will tell you that ascertaining the cost is important. Now, material cost, employee cost, overheads, how do you classify this? Are in the link to ascertainment of cost? So you have three chapters which are exclusively focused on ascertainment of cost and determination of selling price and profitability. Once cost is ascertained, only then selling price minus cost is equal to profit at a very fundamental level. So only when you're able to ascertain the cost, then comes the question of profitability and pricing. Next, cost control. Unless you ascertain the cost, because if you remember the very first page we read before we began, at that point of time, they had two objectives, cost control and cost reduction. So here we're talking about cost control. How do you control cost? One is determination of predetermined and standard costing, measurement of actual performance, comparison. So the second chapter also has a particular topic called standard costing, which focus on variance. What is variance? Budgeted, actual. Budgeted, what is budgeted? What is actual? What are the differences? So it is talking about the comparison part, analysis of variance and action. And only when you are able to ascertain the cost, ascertain the profit, understand the variance, it will be useful for the decision making. So most of the decision making related chapters are not here. They will be coming in your SCMP. But here, the final level, here your first uh, objective is to ascertain the cost very clearly. So cost sheet is a good method or a good tool for you to ascertain the cost. So rather, did you understand the difference between cost control and cost reduction? Is it clear for you? Can you quickly explain what are the difference between cost control and cost reduction?
Cost control focuses on maintaining, and cost reduction focuses on reducing. And cost control is more like it focuses on ascertaining the lowest cost possible, while cost reduction due to the changes will lead to the lowest.
Fair enough. So when you said maintenance, which actually says that we're re-establishing the cost. We're deciding this is what should happen, and then you're trying to maintain it or cut it off at the pre-established cost. Now, cost reduction is a further step. Once, even after ascertaining, how else can we reduce the cost with additional changes? Okay, this is the fundamental part. Then you have to understand the essentials. One is trust on the system, simple and informative, accurate, authentic, and all of this. So while you have to design a cost accounting system, which may not be the case in your article, but this is a purely practical perspective, but it's good to remember the elements of it. What is more relevant for your exam is understanding what are cost units, what are cost drivers, and all of that. And responsibility centers, cost center, revenue center. You have to understand the difference between cost center, revenue center, profit center. Hope you went through this. and elements of cost. So the next three chapters are dependent on elements of cost. When you're talking about elements of cost, one is material cost, direct and indirect. So you should be able to clearly distinguish what is direct cost and what is indirect cost, especially when it comes to material cost. So it is easy to understand what is material cost, what is employee cost, and what are other expenses, but difficult to understand what is direct and what is direct and what is indirect unless you get a grasp of things. So direct, indirect on all the aspects. Now, apart from all of this, there is something else called overheads, which cannot be directly attributable to any of this cost. That's where you have to break them down, which are further classified into production related, administration related, sales, or selling and distribution overheads. These are the elements of cost which will consume the next three chapters. In terms of understanding how do you know segregate the costs like fixed cost, variable costs, they are very much essential for finding out the break even point and determining the profitability and all of that. So what are fixed costs, what are variable costs is something that you have to clearly know. So coming to the last part, methods of costing, say single costing, batch costing, job costing, contract costing, process costing. Each of this is an individual chapter. These are methods. You can arrive at a particular cost using multiple methods. Now, where do you use this particular method depends upon the industry, depends on the product, depends on the service. So you are given a set of methods to arrive at the costing using the most relevant method. So you have all of this will be covered in your second module. And finally, techniques of costing. Let's say it talks about uniform costing, marginal costing, absorption costing, all of these techniques, especially marginal costing and standard costing, both of them are two other chapters in that module 2. So module 2 is all about methods of costing and techniques of costing. So before you get to module 2, where you understand techniques and methods of costing, you have to understand ascertainment of cost, material cost, labor cost, overheads, and how do you ascertainment cost and apportionment of costs also, which is largely covered in the overheads chapter. And apart from that, you need to understand how do you control cost and how do you reduce the cost. So once this is done, the overall aspect of this is covered in ABC costing and also your cost accounting. I would say cost sheet. So the cost sheet is the culmination of all the 3-4 chapters which you learn in the previous level. Once you're reasonably done with this, you're moving on to the second module where you're looking at methods of costing and types of costing, in techniques of costing in a particular way. Okay, so whenever you get any gap in clarity, always come back and refer to the first chapter. So once the better command you have on your first chapter, it will be easy for you to go ahead and fix the gap in the chapters. Okay, so this is one central chapter which you have to keep coming back. Now, please quickly go through what you have written one last time for 5 minutes, and then you can break for lunch. So just get a hang of things because whatever is there in the book, it has to come and settle in your mind. So when you look at a particular topic called budgetary control, standard costing, you should be able to understand is it a method of costing or technique of costing. So let that thing imprint on your mind.